Hello and how's it going? Zach D Productions here, and I am here for a versus video for you guys. So for this versus video, we'll be talking about two albums from two different bands in the modern rock, post-grunge genre, whatever you want to call them. These two bands are Breaking Benjamin and 3 Days Grace. So the two albums that we'll be talking about in this video are Outsider by 3 Days Grace and Ember by Breaking Benjamin. Now, what do these two albums have in common? Well, they're both the sixth studio album from each band, and they also came out on the same year, 2018, so figured might as well do a versus video for these two albums here. I already do know which album I like more, and I'm sure a lot of you already know my answer, but let's first go ahead and talk about 3 Days Grace's album, Outsider. Now, I do think that this album is one of their weakest, maybe even their weakest. Honestly, either this album or their latest album, Explosions, I think, is the worst 3 Days Grace album. I mean, I think all of us can agree that the Matt stuff is just not as good as the Adam era of the band. Lyrically, it's a massive decline, and even musically as well, to some extent. Now, I wouldn't really say that the Matt Walsh era has strayed too much away from 3 Days Grace's sound. I mean, the albums that they've done so far with Matt, I mean, they still sound like 3 Days Grace, if that makes sense, but there's just something missing, you know? I don't know if it's originality or, you know, it's just one of those cases where it's like bands like 3 Days Grace, like, they've pretty much done all that they can do. You know, again, in the lyrics, definitely a decline. I mean, they do need to come up with better lyrics, and this album here, I do think, has some of their weakest lyrical content, you know, especially when you listen to songs like I Am an Outsider, which lyrically, not all that interesting. You could maybe say the same thing about The Mountain as well. I mean, The Mountain, I remember when this came out as a single, it's not as bad lyrically as I Am an Outsider, but, you know, it is what it is. Right, Left, Wrong, I mean, it could definitely use some work when it comes to the lyrics as well, but still not all bad. I would say Infrared is one of the best tracks on the album. Same can be said for Nothing to Lose But You. Also have always been one of my favorites on the album, but yeah, the album, it does have its redeeming factors, but all in all, it is one of their weakest, I'd say. Definitely not an album I return to very much. The second half of this album really does lack replay value, especially, but, you know, few pretty good songs, but overall, nothing amazing or anything. I mean, could you live without listening to this album? Absolutely. It's really not anything special, but again, there's a couple good songs on the album, I'd say. So yeah, Outsider, it's kind of a meh album for me. But then we got Ember by Breaking Benjamin, and in my personal opinion, this is probably a step up from their last album, Dark Before Dawn. Now with this album here, they definitely amped up the heaviness. They went into this album with a heavier sound this time around. Not necessarily to the degree that Breaking Benjamin completely changed their sound. Like, I know that I remember when this album came out, there were some people that are even saying that Breaking Benjamin are kind of going metalcore a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't call this a metalcore album by any means, but, you know, there are some songs on the album that kind of do go into that territory a little bit. But, you know, I think it works for them. You know, the heaviness that they play on this album, it works for them, you know. Now, I will say that this album, I think, does have one of the worst Breaking Benjamin songs of all time, and that is The Dark of You. I know that a lot of people will probably disagree with me on that. I've never really been that big of a fan of this song. Now, when I heard that this song was going to be, you know, more different, more experimental, you know, I just think that, you know, it should offer way more, I think. I was not that impressed with this song when I first heard it, and I'm still not that big of a fan of it, and I still think it's one of their weakest songs. But I mean, is it awful? Not necessarily, but I just don't listen to it. That's all. But yeah, again, I dig the heaviness on this album. Probably one of Breaking Benjamin's heaviest albums. I remember when Red Cold River came out as a single, and you know, being pretty impressed. I mean, I remember kind of being shocked by, you know, the heaviness of it. You know, it works as a first single because it does let you know what you're in for the rest of the album. But yeah, definitely a great track, along with Tourniquet. Close Your Eyes, which I don't really see that many people talk about this song. Probably one of my favorites on the album, actually. You have Torn in Two, which is also really good. Probably another one of my favorites. I believe that song was supposed to be on Dark Before Dawn. It was a B-side, but they just threw it onto this album instead. But yeah, all in all, pretty good album, I'd say, from Breaking Benjamin. I mean, I wouldn't go as far to say that it's their best work, but pretty good album, I'd say. So Ember. So obviously, I'm sure you guys know my choice for this video between Outsider by 3 Days Grace and Ember by Breaking Benjamin. I'm sure a lot of you know the winner of this video. It's got to be Ember by Breaking Benjamin. Just, well, lyrically it's way better, obviously, than Outsider. More creativity, and I mean, it's Breaking Benjamin. I mean, I've always thought that Breaking Benjamin was the better of the two bands, so there you have it. Now, that could just be more of a bias thing, because, you know, I do prefer Breaking Benjamin to 3 Days Grace, and, you know, I've been a fan of them longer and everything like that, so yeah. But I think objectively, I would say that Ember is a stronger album. So Ember is the winner of this video, so let me know what you think. Which album do you like more, Outsider by 3 Days Grace or Ember by Breaking Benjamin? Feel free to let me know. Are you a fan of these bands? Feel free to let me know. So on that note, thanks for watching and have a good one.